Peace on earth and goodwill to all. Well, there's not much of that around the world. What can we expect in 2025 for Ukraine? The talk is of a ceasefire, but really? And there are always the unknown unknowns, remember? So join me, Jan Darash, for How We Got Here.
With December 31st, the year 2024 draws to a close. It is also day 1042 of Russia's invasion of Ukraine, and at least day 1042 of Ukraine receiving aid from friendly countries to withstand Moscow's onslaught. According to the data the Kiel Institute has been collecting since January 24th, 2022, the U.S. remains the #1 supporter of Ukraine to date, with over 88 billion euros worth of military, humanitarian, and financial assistance. Rushing before President Joe Biden's term ends on January 20th, 2025, Washington announced a $1.25 billion military aid package to Ukraine on Friday. This latest tranche includes munitions for missile and air defense systems, Stinger missiles, and artillery rounds. In November, Biden greenlighted Ukraine to use U.S.-supplied long-range missiles, specifically the Army tactical missile systems, for strikes inside Russia, allowing Kyiv to exert additional pressure on Russian and North Korean forces deployed in the Kursk region. Germany, coming in second on the Kiel Institute list, has allocated €7.5 billion in its 2024 budget to aid for Ukraine, but is also set to almost halve its support to €4 billion in 2025. Following up on authorizing the transfer of Leopard 2 tanks to Ukraine in January last year, in 2024, Berlin continued providing Kyiv with military equipment, including Iris-T air defense systems. Ukraine's #3 backer, the UK, pledged £3 billion in military support for the 2024-2025 period and vowed to maintain this level of aid annually until 2030-2031. Prime Minister Keir Starmer has also hinted at sending troops to train Kyiv soldiers on the ground in Ukraine. For its part, Poland signed a 10-year military cooperation agreement with Ukraine in July earlier this year. Moreover, during his visit to Lviv this December, Poland's Prime Minister Donald Tusk announced that Warsaw's 45th military aid package for Ukraine, worth €100 million, was ready, adding that a follow-up package was in the making and should be ready by January 2025. Not all countries, however, were so eager to help embattled Ukraine. Under Prime Minister Robert Fico, who took office in October 2024, Slovakia halted military assistance to Ukraine in a complete 180 from its previous stance. This U-turn likely encouraged Russia's leader Vladimir Putin to welcome Fico's offer of hosting potential Ukraine-Russia peace talks in Slovakia. Meanwhile, U.S. President-elect Donald Trump has been calling for a just, sustainable, and secure peace, according to his Ukraine envoy, Keith Kellogg. The retired lieutenant general is expected to visit Kyiv and tour other European capitals in early January to expedite the peace process.
Our guest today is Bartłomiej Kot, the Programme Director of the Warsaw Security Forum. Welcome once more to our programme. It's great to have you.
Hello, it's lovely to be here with you.
We're going to sum up the situation in Ukraine, both operationally on the battlefield and diplomatically, and likely scenarios for certainly the first part of 2025, if we can. So how would you sum up the chief player in Ukraine, the president, Volodymyr Zelenskyy? He seems to have undergone a metamorphosis from the darling of the press, the darling of the liberal left, if we can put it that way, to a somewhat less glorified figure. Is that an accurate way of describing him this year?
It is indeed, because the metamorphosis is also very much connected to the fact what kind of the narrative he had to deliver both internally in Ukraine and externally to the decision makers in the West. Of course, right now everyone is looking at Trump. Everyone is looking at the decisions that Trump will be making. But the truth is that the presidential campaign in the U.S., which actually dates it dated back deep into the 2020-24. To some degree, it also restrained the actions of the Biden administration. And there were at some point some actually expectations from the Biden administration towards Zelenskyy and towards his plans that he delivered to the White House, etc., etc. When we look at it back in time, then we can actually see that the victory plan that Zelenskyy prepared, it actually it didn't match the expectations of the U.S. administration back then. And I'm talking about the Biden's administration, not Trump's administration. Now we can, of course, actually discuss what the expectations were. In my opinion, when you look at it through the perspective right now, the expectations were that he will also make some remarks related to the territorial claims or territorial integrity of Ukraine. Biden administration was always delivering the narrative that they will support Ukraine as long as it takes. Until the victory, etc., etc., and always leaving actually the space for Ukrainians to define what kind of reality there will be, what kind of a victory they want to achieve. At the same time, they were always saying to Ukrainians that there is, of course, the potential, there is a perspective of NATO membership. This as actually an ultimate security guarantee to Ukraine. At some point during 2024, it was quite obvious to anyone who is looking deeper into this conflict that Ukraine is losing the offensive capabilities, strategically offensive capabilities. I'm not talking about, some small gains like on the front line, but the capability to literally to break the front line and to regain the territories that are under the Russian control.
Offensive failed, didn't it?
It failed, if I'm not mistaken, prior to 2024. Yeah. In 2024, there was no big gain, apart from, of course, Kursk Oblast, and we can actually get back to it in a second, because it also considered some issue during the potential peace talks that will be happening. But the truth is that there was an acceptance, in my opinion, at some point in the Western world among the policymakers and among the think tankers, people who were actually covering this subject, that it might not be politically correct to talk about it in public, that Ukraine will have to accept loss of some territories. But it was a bit of an elephant in the room. But at the same time, there was always a discussion about the perspective of NATO membership of Ukraine, something that would be a gain once Ukraine loses the territories.
It always seems to be before these promises of NATO membership always seems to be going away from Zelensky's reach.
Indeed, but the question on my side always stays whether that was ever a tangible perspective.
Yes.
Because it was said that it is actually Biden's administration that is at some point limiting this perspective, not putting the proper wording as Ukrainians would like it to have in the communiques, etc., etc. But then when you look at the member states of NATO and countries such as Slovakia, such as Hungary, even Germany, they were reluctant to give Ukraine this perspective. This bargain that was actually somewhere maybe not done publicly, not discussed publicly, it was flawed in my opinion from the very beginning.
Well, is Zelenskyy the man for the job to see the next phase, if we can call it that, of the Ukrainian war?
Well, legally, there is no chance of changing Zelenskyy at this point. There would have to be, of course, elections that are due to be done because of the Ukrainian constitution. But this is actually the discussion for as what I said, like the end of the war, the peace talks. When you look at polling right now, if I'm not mistaken, there are contenders. And I'm not saying that it's 100% sure that Zelenskyy will win another presidential elections, but and then we are actually touching upon the other perspective, as I said, in the internal narrative of Zelenskyy towards his own people. And I guess that the huge burden on him actually would lie not right now, not during the peace talks, but right after the peace talks. Because when we look at the potential result of this war, a lot of us are actually, when we comment about the end of the war, we are focusing on territories, the gains and losses on territories. I don't believe that this is the right perspective at this point. The big question for me is what kind of a future Ukraine there will be in terms of its independence, like a possibility to form alliances, a possibility to enter alliances, possibility to reform its military, possibility to reform its government, etc., etc. This is the most important perspective of Ukraine after the war. Of course, we can right now, when we look at the map, when we look at the potential, like military potential from both sides, we see that Ukraine will possibly have to limit its ambitions when it comes to the territories. But the most important part of the result of this war would be to what extent Ukraine will be ready and would be allowed, let me put it that way, through the negotiation process, to become the member state of EU and in the future the member state of NATO.
Well, that's right. I mean, there's been a lot of talk about, as you rightly mentioned, about the peace talks, negotiations. Russia doesn't have to agree.
They don't have to agree, but maybe I'll be controversial right now in saying so, but I believe that actually it is in Putin's favor, even in his own thinking, to agree to these peace talks. There is one issue though, and this is of course the issue of the fact that the Ukrainians are still in possession of some of the Russian land in terms of like pre-war
ever decreasing.
Borders. And as long as they have it, as long as they possess it, they have a bit of a trump card in the deck of cards while entering the negotiations. And this is the major effort that a lot of the Western politicians are doing right now, is to actually give the Ukrainians as much as it is necessary to sustain in this position. Because whenever there will be a kind of a discussion, whether it's ceasefire or peace talks, it is necessary for them to have this land. For Putin, the other way around. He would do whatever it takes to take this territory back, and then, in my opinion, it is in his own favor to enter these talks, because he's in no position to occupy the whole territory of Ukraine, even after the potentially, touch the wood, the front line collapses. He's in no position right now to occupy the whole territory of Ukraine. And he can only bet on the situation in which actually what I was saying a second ago, the post-war Ukraine will be open for his actions that will not necessarily would have to be military, but can actually become political, can become undermining for the system. He can bet on Ukraine becoming a bit failed state, as a state that is open for disinformation, open for clandestine operations and stuff like that. And if you like history, and I know you like, take a reference to Catherine the Great and the partitions of Poland. You digest it bit after a bit.
Time, yes. I mean, that's the analogy that probably we don't talk about too often, isn't it? The gradual disintegration of Ukraine. But so what you're saying is that the recovery of the Kursk Oblast, however the stalemate, the dynamic stalemate, stays more or less the same. It allows both sides to claim some sort of victory and then settle for some sort of ceasefire negotiation.
The question about victory is extremely important.
However you
it is extremely important. Once more, I will refer to Zelensky's internal narrative, because the narrative over this war, the way it will be presented to Ukrainians, will define the future of Ukraine. If it will be presented in a way that it is, similar to the Yalta question, as the Central Eastern Europe was facing that after the Second War, that they were winning the war, and then someone from the West came and actually betrayed them, spoiled their own blood, and they were only, feeding them with weaponry, but without actually the potential for success. Then Ukraine will have an extremely hard time in establishing the post-war relations with the West that will be still, under the impression of the willingness, at least, to become a member state of EU and a member state of NATO. With Trump in power, NATO membership is not there anywhere near actually the potential to be fulfilled. The EU membership is extremely dependent on the institutional changes within the EU, and no one in the EU is currently actually open to discuss that in real talks, which gives Ukraine actually a couple of years of stagnation, in limbo, before even those organizations will be open for Ukraine to enter. And this is a time in which the Ukrainian elites will simply have to, first of all, focus a lot on the process, not only on the membership, but on the process itself, because the process itself is extremely important. Reforming your military units. Ukraine is still not ready in that terms to enter NATO. Reforming your administration, adopting acquis, etc., etc. The process is as important actually as becoming a member state. And the question is whether the Ukrainian elites are in a position right now where they will go for something which is harder, which is actually to keep up these reforms going, etc., and keep the momentum and keep the morale of the people, or whether they will go into the narrative that is extremely easy, to say that we wanted the victory, but it is the West who betrayed us.
Yes, the stab in the back. Thing. The final question to you, Mr. Kott, what's the likely effect on the European solidarity, which at the start of this phase of the war was at least very strong, and now it's the fractions, the fissures are starting to open up?
Well, it is defined through the interests, let's be honest. And because we started this war in thinking about the foreign policy, about security policy, very much focused on values. And this is, in my opinion, this war, it is a turning point in our way of thinking. Right now, when we look at the US and the victory of Donald Trump, we understand that this is a new wave of politicians coming. Of course, they have well-known names. We know them from the past. But the way of thinking about foreign policy, etc., is very much focused on this realism way of doing that, like a sphere of influences, etc., spheres of influence, etc. And this is actually something which comes back to the everyday way of thinking about foreign policy and security policy right now.
Yes.
The issue is that still a lot of the European politicians, they try to tie this realistic way of thinking to this, values-based policy, and this is what is happening right now in the EU. But the truth is that there is the more we get into details of this way of thinking that is currently actually predominant, in my opinion, in the West. It is actually it is based on we are back at actually thinking about policy merely through the interests, and which is for good and for bad. What we realize it is that actually whether the country is ready for war, it is something which defines its potential. Demographics defines its potential. The armed forces, they define its potential. The economy defines its potential. The old paradigm is not there anymore, and we are building a new one, simply speaking.
The old things about power and geography and history still apply. Thank you very much, Bartłomiej Kott, for joining us once more.
Thank you for having me.
Good luck to everybody for 2025. We'll need it, I'm sure. So join us again for How We Got Here, Mondays, Wednesdays and Fridays at 14:15. That's 2:15 Old Money, CET. See you then.